This is the thing, we have zero idea of what's gonna go on. Tons of rods on the deck, jerk bait, swim baits, a jig, some finesse stuff, crankbaits, just basically what I think is going to be productive. But this is gonna be all about dialing in a body of water, pre-spawn Highland reservoirs all over the country. And so this is sort of like just a video where I'm able to go and try to dial it in. Hopefully we can figure this sucker out. But I got a feeling we should be able to figure something out. This is one of my favorite times to go bass fishing. This is the bass rut, like my buddy Andy Morgan would say. They're heading to the bank. All of them are heading up there. You know where they're going to be eventually. You just gotta sort of intercept them in transit, if you will. You can sort of see this bank sort of goes to 45 and then it goes to flat right there. That, you know, a bluff end is more of like a very prominent transition. You have a bluff, then it goes to a flat, very sharp. But a lot of the subtleties on Highland reservoirs is really what it comes down to. Figuring out the right rock. That's a huge deal. What rock are they on? Are they pea gravel? Or are they chunk rock? Are they on, you know, bluffy banks, shale rock? And then it's like ultimately the angle of the banks really determine, are they in the creeks? Are they in the main lake? All of this is part of why I love it. It's a very visual type deal. Running down the lake and be like, yeah, that looks right. I might stop in here and fish, make a few casts, see what we can see. Looks pretty good. So water's a little bit cleaner. I'm sure the cool thing about a lot of these places is like your creeks are gonna be stained, a little bit more stained. Your more main lake is probably gonna be a little bit cleaner. Typically is the deal. We have some cloud conditions right now, pretty cloudy, not a lot of wind. And so I tend to go to more like natural or like more solid colors on my jerk baits. And like if it's like a little bit clear, I'll go to like more translucent colors, as if it's like brighter and sunnier. So I already have a color called Natty Light on. I'm gonna go ahead and sort of work through here. Over the last year or so, I've been throwing this plug right here. It's a little jerk bait. It's called a Loco Special, made by 13 Fishing. They have like a little shallow lip one like this, and they have a deeper lip, and just come off with 3rd place finish on that bad dude right there. It's just, it's a good profile, good bait, and some good hooks on him, and then ultimately has really what you need for jerkbait and good colors. That's a huge deal. Just having the right colors ultimately determine whether you really crack them at one day or not catching very many. Let me see here. I think I'm gonna go with this guy. I like this guy a lot. I like him a lot. Lucky Charm's one of my favorites. The big thing is I tried to go with one shallow and one deep jerk bait. So I can sort of figure out, a lot of times when I'm throwing a jerk bait, it's all about depth zone. And so that's why I always like to have a deeper running one, like, you know, 6 to 8 or 9 foot depth zone, which this deeper one does just that. Or in a shallow one where if the fish are up there on top of the flats, I have something to where I can figure out the depth zone that they're in. But the biggest thing is figuring out the depth zone they're in. I mean, that's the cool thing about these places is really no matter where you go in the country, Highland reservoirs fish very similar, whether you're at Table Rock or Beaver Lake or you're in Kentucky like a Barren River, or they set up very similar. Now sometimes it's a depth zone is the key in figuring out what presentation tends to play over another. Water temperature, water clarity, depth zone the fish are in. Might not be on this flat stuff. They might want something that's a little bit steeper. Even though it's warm, a lot of times as an angler, you tend to rush them and they're just moving up. It's warming up, weather's nice. I'm not saying they can't be on this, but that's not just sort of processing some of the information you're sort of seeing. Like you get a little bit of a vibe. What we'll do is we'll just stop real quick. I just see a little hard spot. I just want to see, like maybe throw like a swim bait on it, you know? Sort of figure it out as we go. Oh, he's coming to look at it. He's right there next to the boat. There he is. Gosh, dang, smoked it. Jerkbait. Oh gosh, a big one too. Oh gosh, a big smallmouth. Look at that big sucker. Oh, barely got it. Yeah. Oh gosh, don't do it. That's what I love about it. Golly. We just pulled up on this little hump right here. We gotta be careful about these guys. Look at that. Awesome. and just had a fish switching up some different colors. Had like more of the solid color, now I went to that little more of a translucent color. Even though it's a little bit of a low light day, I felt like that was the deal. But when you see that hook, that's a big smallmouth too. That's a beautiful fish. Gosh, so chunky. All right, got a little bit of a clue. Dang, it's a beautiful fish. This place right here has all three species, from spotted bass, largemouth, and obviously smallmouth. That fish is actually sort of, I'm fishing up on top of this little flat hump right here. Good little place where a lot of these fish will spawn. And you know, that fish is actually off of the hump. So that's sort of just trying to figure out that depth zone. I feel like I was sitting probably 25 foot or so, and that fish was probably in that 15-foot zone, so it's suspended. You know, and that's always, you always try to pay attention to where your boat's sitting at and just sort of getting a vibe for what those fish and where that depth zone they're really keying in on. A little bit of a clue, anyway. You know, water temperature right here is actually right at 50 degrees. So we've had a lot of warm weather over the last couple weeks, but it's still not as, you know, you sit out here, it's 60 degrees outside, it's raining, you think, oh man, it's time for them fish to be spawning. And one thing that happens a lot of times throughout the year is anglers, we tend to rush the fish. We think, oh man, we got a big week of 70-degree weather, they're gonna be spawning, and it takes the fish a while, especially in these deep reservoirs, like this one right here, it takes them a while to adapt to the conditions and change up, because it takes so long for these places to warm up. Those fish are down there in 30, 40 foot of water. They don't know it's warmed up in that pocket to 60 degrees. So that's where I feel like we as anglers tend to do that. And so that's why I always try to, even though the water temperature might seem really high, or the weather temperature might be really high, doesn't mean the fish are back there where you might think they are. You know, there's a big line between wintering places, the fish are wintering, and like the shallow water spawning zone. But I mean, we're pretty good out here. We're a decent ways out here. And this is the thing that a lot of times people think the bass always have to spawn in a pocket. This hump right here comes up to like 5 or 8 feet deep, especially on the clearer impoundments. A lot of the fish will never leave the main lake. Gosh, that one smoked it. A largemouth. There you go, buddy. There you go. All right. So that fish again was up there a little bit shallower. Sitting here, working the bait all the way back to the boat. Not a big one, a little 14-incher. Thanks, buddy. All right. Starting to piece it together. But that's the thing is, like, you don't, even though like you get on a little pattern, okay, these fish are like on this little hump, that doesn't mean you have to run that exact deal. That's the cool thing about highland reservoirs in general, is you can run so many different patterns. There could be the flat point pattern, it could be little shallow humps like we are right here, steep bluff wall patterns, but you try to get a few of them, and especially when I'm like practicing for a tournament, trying to get ready for an event, I want to have multiple different patterns going. I don't want to just have this jerkbait pattern going, because the thing about these places is they change every day. And you have to have a couple different patterns going so that ultimately when those fish change, you say you pull up to this spot and you don't get a bite, you're able to do something else. Oh gosh, smoked it. You know, one thing I love about that jerkbait is it just gets them if they're suspended, if they're out deeper, those fish just can't handle it. It's just something about when those fish are starting to pull up, as a largemouth, smallmouth, it's just a multi-species bass fishing catcher. It just catches bass. Like, and the thing is figuring out that cadence. They seem to have won it pretty slow overall. Again, not a great big one, but man, it's just a lure that does so well in the pre-spawn. It works all year long. I feel like it's one of the most underrated categories of lures because it really works all season. But it definitely shines because it's in this pre-spawn, because it's one of the only lures to truly suspend and get those bass's attention. Now, a lot of times I don't even feel like these fish are always suspended. I feel like it's just something that hovers and allows them to sort of, when they're coming out of that deep water, it's just an easy meal, and that's a lot of times what these fish want to see. Let's see if we can catch another one. Drop it away from here too. There you go, fat little one right there. That guy. Whoa. Hey buddy, now settle on down. Heck yeah, look at that. That's what I'm talking about. Fat one, man. Pre-spawn female, little baby female, I think. I'm not saying it couldn't be a bit large. No. There we go. Beautiful fish. Heck yeah. Chunky little sucker. I want to see. 15. Gosh, got it. There you go. Duplicating the pattern. That's what it's about. Another solid fish. Thanks, buddy. Let's see if we can catch another one. That's exactly what we want to see now. So we just pulled up on another little flat, little hump. Literally within just probably 10 casts, got another bite. So sometimes I'll just sort of go through, you know, so you want to check places. You might be like a morning thing or an afternoon. You don't want to try to stay on the same stuff, but you definitely want to double check that pattern to see if it's something that's happening all over the lake or if it's just small section or just one or two spots. So that sort of gives me a little bit of like a, we might have figured something out. There's nothing better in bass fishing when you really get that feel, like you get that feeling when you're like, hey, we figured it out. Like you got to think about, okay, like a fish is down there, following it, he's behind it, jerk, jerk. I might let it pause for like 7, 8 seconds, and then I'll let it sit there, and then I'll jerk, 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 and I might go jerk, 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 real quick snaps to try to like get it away from him. Like think he's there, and then twitch, let it sit there. You gotta figure, you gotta switch it up. Like sometimes I'll just go 1, 2, pause, 1, pause, 1, 2, pause, 1, pause. But there's just something about it, once you figure that cadence out, that helps a lot. It's a middle of the water column bait. It's not always has to be on the bottom. So you could draw a fish probably further with this bait than most baits. It's very similar to like a topwater. They'll come a long ways to get a topwater because they're interested in seeing like what's going on. They hear that in the water column, they sort of, that's how they actively feed. They feed up a lot of times, especially this time of year. All right, so we sort of just pulled up on this little transition. This is a main lake bluff end. And you can sort of see it's a little bit bluffy and flat right here, but when we round the corner, you'll see what we call, like, why they call it a bluff end. For some of the anglers out there who have not got a chance to fish highland reservoirs, this is often, when you hear that term bluff end, this is what they're talking about, you know, and this is a textbook bluff end right here, right off the channel. So there's multiple different places that they set up at in the creeks, and really that's the key. A lot of times if you run this pattern is figuring out, you know, if they're better in the creeks, on the main channel, secondary stuff. That's what it's about. So we're just picking up a little DT right here and gonna go crank down this flat stretch and maybe crank a little bit of the steeper bluff itself to see if, you know, these bass are pulling up on these little transitional areas. This is exactly what I was talking about. Now you can really sort of see why it's called a bluff end, because literally as it sort of is super steep bank, goes back into that flat transition. And then a lot of times these bass will be in this river channel, and as it warms up, they'll start to get up on top of this stuff and they'll actually funnel down these banks to their spawning areas. And that's why it's such a great way to really target a lot of these transition fish, you know, in the pre-spawn, because that's where they're headed. That's where they're gonna head to. And just, a lot of times you need a little bit of wind, you need the right conditions, but they'll set up on those little corners. All right, we first started with like a demon color DT. Now I'm gonna transition to more of a wiggle wart, more of a natural color. The water's still a little bit stained, but because there's no wind, you know, that's why I have so many crankbaits on the front deck, is literally for every little water condition, or if the fish want a wide wobbling crankbait or more of a tight wobbling crankbait, that's why you gotta sort of become prepared for switching rods and going through a rotation of crankbaits to figure out which one they want. Let's go to the next spot. There he is. Gosh, Smoked it. Rainy day, smallmouth. Golly, they're so mean. Come here, buddy. Come here, my swing in. There you go. There you go. That's exactly what I was thinking. They should be on that deal. Nice little fish. Water got a little dirtier, and you know that's the thing about these reservoirs is like when a spring rain hits, there'll be like little pockets of clear water, little pockets of dirty water. Picked up that Demon DT. There you go. See you later, buddy. One thing you really have to pay attention to on a lot of these places is ultimately what is the water level doing? How much rain have they had locally, recently? Because really when the water comes up, it changes a lot of what they do, but then you have to really even get it even deeper than that because it comes down to, you know, was it warm rain? Is it cold rain? Because a lot of times in these steeper hollers and steeper little places, you have so much influx of water. When it's warm, those fish will tend to push to the backs of those pockets because it brings a lot of fish, a lot of bait in those areas. And when it's cold rain, a lot of times they'll stay on this main channel stuff. So paying attention to the weather, you know, a couple weeks out and the water level is a huge deal and can definitely help you sort of target these fish and figure these fish out a little bit quicker. And really comes down to when you're selecting your lures, knowing that you've had a lot of rain in the area will normally give you a pretty good indication that those fish, probably the water's gonna be a little bit dirtier and maybe you might need, you know, maybe a little bit wider wobbling crankbait, like maybe a wiggle wart, or if the water's pretty clear, maybe the DT, or even potentially like a flat side, so like a OG Slim. So that's a lot of times what I'm really paying attention to before I even get to the location that I'm fishing, especially on these kind of locations, these highland reservoirs. You really want to pay attention to what that weather's doing and what the lake levels are doing, because that'll sort of give you a clue into what you're going to expect. There he is. There he is. That might be a big one. No, it's not a great big one. Another smallmouth though. Get up in here, buddy. Get up in here. Typical little corner. Right there. A nice little smallmouth. Thanks, buddy. Here he is. Oh, big one. Big one. Smoked it. That's something. That's gotta be a big one. Dude, that sucker trained. I mean, you crank that sucker down there. That's gotta be a smallmouth. And watch it be a 2-pounder. Man, I'm telling you, that sucker literally train wrecked it though. Gosh, it's a nice one. He hit it and went the opposite direction. That's so awesome. That's every single place that we've got a bite on, it looks exactly like this. It's more of a shale rock. All right, buddy, come here. That's exactly what you want to see. Oh, I thought hey, look at that. Heck yeah, beautiful fish. Got him, went the opposite way. All right, we figured something out a little bit. Every single one of these fish that we've caught on this crankbait has been on this more of a shale rock. It has to have more of a creek channel or a river channel close by to it. Little transition, that one's up there on the flatter point, but that right there is all I need. I just need a clue. This is the problem. A lot of times anglers will get so caught up and they want to get super dialed in practice. But the thing is, you don't necessarily need to do that. All you need to do is get a clue for what's going on because conditions are consistently changing and then you sort of have an idea of what these fish are doing. Let this guy go right now. Thank you, buddy. Whoo! I'm not gonna lie, I thought that was a 5, 6 pound smallmouth. It was a good one, but that was exactly what we needed to see. All right, let's go to the next deal. Sometimes if you're having a tough time really developing a pattern, the thing that I tend to do when that is happening, I just put the trolling motor down and go. Pick up a reaction bait. It's low light right now. I got a little bit of fog, cloudy. I mean, it's warm. They should be biting. So a lot of times I'll pull up to like a bluff end or something like that in the mouth of a creek, and I'll just go down through there, fish the pockets, fish the points. And when you get that bite, it allows you to sort of understand like, okay, this might be what they're on. That is the best thing about these types of lakes, is literally that you can run a pattern. And so getting that first bite is super crucial in doing that. So if you are having a tough time, fortunately, we have got on a couple little patterns today, but we're still looking, still scheming around a little bit, make sure we haven't missed nothing.